Hello and welcome to Something Z, and welcome to What If Deku Had a Crime Quirk Part 8. Last time on the What If, the heroes were able to save Bakugo from the League of Villains. And Class 1A just took the provisional license exams, but they haven't got the results yet, so let's jump back into the What If. It's been minutes since the exams ended, and everyone was told to go back into their school uniforms and meet back at the middle of the arena. And in the middle of the arena, when Izuku got back from changing, was a giant board. And when everyone got to the board, the main examiner showed everyone that passed on the board, so everyone in Class 1A passed except Todoroki and Bakugo from the mistakes they made during the exams, such as starting a fight with another student during the test, or just being rude to the people you are saving. Shortly after the scores are revealed, they were told that anyone who failed the exams will have to take another class, and at the end of it you will be able to take the exams again. And the people who passed went to go get their pictures taken for their licenses. So hours after the exams, and while everyone was about to go to bed, Bakugo went to Izuku, and he told him to follow him, and eventually he led Izuku to ground beta. And there they had the fight, with the outcome still the same, even though some things are different. So after a couple of minutes, Bakugo has Izuku pinned to the ground. It is also around that time where All Might shows up, and the two become true rivals. They also get suspended because of the fight, with Bakugo having a longer suspension because he started the fight. So the next day they weren't able to go to the ceremony, so Izuku and Bakugo don't know about the work studies. So we skipped when Izuku finally got back to school, and that day 3 people walked into the classroom. And after some failed attempts, the yellow-haired man tells everyone that in order for them to truly learn about the work studies, they have to fight him. So eventually they make it to Gym Gamma, with the melee fighters at the front and the long-range fighters at the end. But before the actual fight, Class 1A surrounded the yellow-haired person named Mirio. And when the fight began, Mirio's clothes fell through him, and he slipped into the ground. And a couple seconds later, he appeared right in front of Jiro, and he punched her in the gut, knocking her down. The melee fighters then had to run to where Mirio was, and by the time they got there, multiple people were knocked down. At one point, Izuku tried to exploit Mirio's weakness when he became physical, but Mirio was able to counter the attack, knocking Izuku to the ground as well. And shortly after Izuku fell to the ground, everyone fell to the ground too. So shortly after the fight, and when Mirio put on some clothes, Mirio explained that his quirk was weak, but every quirk could be great if you work hard, and that you should turn your experiences into power. Hours after the class, Neji asked Mirio if anyone caught his eye, and after some thinking, he believed that Sir might like to have Izuku intern for him. Days later, Izuku asked Gran Torino if he could intern for him again, but he tells Izuku that he's busy, and that he should ask someone else close to All Might. And eventually he asks All Might if he could work for Sir Night-Eye. So the next day, All Might calls Mirio into the teacher's break room, and when he gets there, All Might is sitting on a couch, with Izuku sitting across from him on another couch. All Might then asks Mirio if he could let Izuku talk to Sir Night-Eye about a work study, which he agrees to. So the next free day that Class 1A had, Izuku went to Sir Night-Eye's agency with Mirio, with one objective, which was to make him laugh. But when Izuku walked into Sir Night-Eye's office to make him laugh, he transformed his face into All Might. But instead of making Sir Night-Eye laugh, it made Sir Night-Eye think that Izuku was making fun of All Might. And after some time, Sir Night-Eye comes up with a deal, which was that Izuku would have to take the stamp from him within 3 minutes. And if he did, he would stamp the form for Izuku to have a work studies here. So once Bubble Girl and Mirio leave the room, the countdown begins, with Izuku jumping around the room trying to grab the stamp. He even tried to use his tears to make Night-Eye unable to see where he was. But Sir used his quirk on Izuku, so he was able to tell where Izuku would land. And by the end of the 3 minutes, Izuku was on the ground with no stamp. But after Night-Eye looked around the room, he could see that even though Izuku was jumping around the room at high speeds, he was purposely dodging the All Might posters. So when Izuku gets back up, he tells him that he has passed the test. Then Night-Eye stamps the form for Izuku to work for his agency. So we skip to the next day, and when Izuku gets to the agency, he learns about the Shiha Saikai. And after the meeting, he and Mirio go on patrol, and eventually after some walking, they get to an alley, and before they were able to walk past it, a little girl runs out of it, and bumps into Izuku, and knocks him to the ground. And when Izuku looks at the alley, he sees Overhaul himself walking out of it. He then asks for Eri to come back to him, and that she's disturbing the heroes. It's then that Mirio picked up Izuku to try and get him back on his feet, and while he was doing this, he put on Izuku's mask to save his identity, to make it so it would be easier to find Overhaul later. And he tells Izuku that they better resume their patrol, but Izuku's seeing the situation, and seeing that the little girl is terrified of this man, he doesn't want to back down. He then asks what has he been doing to her, and in response, Overhaul tells them that he will tell them if they just follow him. And while he was walking back into the alley, he moves his glove with his other hand. Seeing this, Eri runs back to Overhaul's side, and seeing that there was nothing else to do, Mirio and Izuku tell Sir what happened. And when they tell him, he tells Izuku that he is an All Might, and that he can't do anything he wants. And hours later, Izuku learns about what Night-Eye saw when he looked into All Might's future. So days after the encounter, Izuku, Kirishima, Ochako, and Tsu, for some reason, go the same way for their work studies, and they eventually get to Sir Night-Eye's agency. And when they walk inside, they see many pro heroes, such as Fatgum's agency, Ryuku's agency, and their teacher Eraserhead. and when Night Eye believes that everyone's there, he starts the meeting, and there they discuss what they have found recently. And after some discussion about the bullets that seem to be damaging quirk cells, they find out that apparently human DNA has been found in the bullets. So they come to the conclusion that they are using the little girl's blood to make the bullets. And after the meeting, they tell all the pros to look into it, and that if they find where she was located, they will come back to meet. So we skip 2 days into the future, and they get a call to go back to Sir Night Eye's agency. And by that time, they were able to figure out where Eri was. In the morning after, around 8 AM, all the pro heroes at the meeting besides Gran Torino, because he was busy with another case, was standing in front of the base of the Shia Hazaikai. And the mission begins with a police officer ringing the doorbell, saying they have a warrant. But just then, a giant villain bursts through the wall of the building, but the villain gets distracted by Ryuko's agency. So half of the group stays behind while the other half runs into the building. There were people that tried to stop them from continuing on, but Bubble Girl and Centipede were able to stop them. So the rest of them were able to go down some stairs and go to the real base of operations, which leads them to a hallway. And they continue to run straight until they are face to face with a wall. And that's when Mario decides to go by himself, and he uses his permeation to walk through the wall and continue on. And before anyone could do anything, a hole was created under the whole group, so they all fall into the room below them. And what made them were 3 villains, and Sun Eater decided to fight them on his own. And seeing that he was so confident in himself, Fatgum told everyone else to continue on. And after some time, they all listened, and they decided to continue to run down a corridor. And after some time, the villain Mimic decides to target Eraserhead. So he tried to launch a pillar at him, but Fatgum and Kirishima push him out of the way, so they get launched into another room. And after the two leave the group, the walls start to twist and contort. So seeing this, Rocklock uses his special move to lock the walls in place. After some time, Mimic splits up the heroes and the cops by placing walls. So shortly after the walls were placed, Izuku breaks through one of the walls. And when Izuku breaks through, he sees 2 Rocklocks, one seeming to be unharmed, while the other one seems to have a stab wound. But Toga, changing forms, wasn't able to trick Eraser, so he was able to tell who the real one is, using his quirk. And after she was revealed, she started to attack the 2 of them. But right before she left, she was able to stab Eraser in the back, which wasn't that bad, but it was enough to make him bleed. And a bit after the confrontation, Mimic starts to drag everyone deeper down. And for some reason, it seems like the League of Villains were purposely trying to rile up Mimic, to the point where he started to yell at Toga. And after the 3rd time of this, Izuku was able to pinpoint where Mimic was. So he jumped using Volcowling, and he jumped at the wall and kicked it, revealing Mimic's body. Then Eraser used his quirk to nullify Mimic's quirk, so he started to fall. And on his way down, Night Eye used his hyper-density seals to knock him out, while Izuku used full cowling to catch him before he hit the ground. And after they interrogated Mimic a bit, they leave Rocklock to watch him. So Eraser, Night Eye, and Izuku continue to run down the corridor until they eventually get to a wall, which Izuku kicks through. And what the 3 see is Mario facing Overhaul, but he is currently getting stabbed by spikes made out of the surfaces around him. Then the 4 fight, with the heroes seeming to have the upper hand since Eraser is using his quirk to get rid of Overhaul's quirk. But at one point, Eraser needed to blink, and that second he had, Overhaul filled the room with spike in order to get out of Aizawa's vision, and he used his quirk to fuse himself with Shin. And while everyone was distracted, Eraser was taken by one of Overhaul's goons. And before anything else happens, Night Eye tells Miria to get Eri out of there, which he does. And Izuku and Night Eye fight Overhaul, but they weren't able to dodge all of the spikes. And after a couple of minutes, Night Eye gets heavily injured. And after Night Eye gets stabbed in the gut, Overhaul was able to get Eri to come back with the help of the new quirk Overhaul has, because of his fusion. And it's just then that Ryuko's team falls from the streets above, and they take care of Sir Night Eye while Izuku is fighting Overhaul. And eventually he makes stone pillars to take Eri to the surface. But after seeing Mario's cape, Eri gets the courage, and she jumps out of Shizuki's grasp. And in the process, she uses her rewind quirk to split the 2, so Overhaul is now just himself. And when she lands in Izuku's arms, he loses control, so Izuku accidentally uses 100%, and he launches the 2 of them into the air. And Izuku, after seeing what had happened, he comes to the conclusion that Eri can rewind his body. So when he lands, he ties her to himself, and he uses 100% full cowling, and he fights Overhaul. And after a couple of minutes, Izuku was able to beat Overhaul. And when the fight was over, Eri's quirk starts to get out of control, and it starts to strain Izuku. But before anything else could happen, Eraser was able to erase her quirk. So the heroes were successfully able to rescue Eri. So we skip to the next day, and everyone who was injured is currently in the hospital. And Sir Night Eye died from the injuries he got while fighting Overhaul. So we skip a couple of days after Night Eye's funeral, and Eraser just told Class 1A about the school festival that will happen by the end of the week. And he tells them that they will have to come up with an attraction for them to do. And eventually, after some discussion, they come up with a dance. And hours after class, Izuku and Mirio go visit Eri in the hospital, and they tell her about the festival. And after asking if they could, they decide to let Eri come to the festival. So now we skip to the end of the week and the day of the festival, and everything that happens in the canon happens. So Izuku is currently on his way back from the store after buying a new robe for Ayama, and he has his new gloves on that Hatsume made. And on his way back, he runs into a disguised gentle criminal in La Brava, and after talking to each other, Izuku eventually figures out that the disguised person is actually gentle criminal in La Brava. So they start to fight with Izuku trying to use one for all and get him quickly, but Gentle uses his quirk to make Izuku bounce around, and eventually them fighting gets them to a construction site. And there, Gentle makes the beams bounce around to the point where they start to move out of place, and a beam was about to hit an innocent person, so Izuku jumps under it and catches it, so he is stuck holding a beam. But by the time Izuku dropped the beam, Gentle and La Brava had launched themselves towards UA. So he uses full cowling, and he uses Gentle's aerial trampolines to reach them, and when he gets to them, Izuku knocks them to the ground, but La Brava uses her quirk to power up Gentle, so now Gentle is able to go head to head with Izuku. But during the fight, La Brava grabs the laptop, and she goes to hack UA systems, so that gives Gentle even more of a reason to win to stop her. But at the end of the fight, he was caught off balance, and Izuku was able to sneak behind him, and he pinned him to the ground. And seeing Gentle pinned, La Brava runs back and she begs Izuku to get off of him. And after a couple of minutes, Ectoplasm and Hound Dog show up, and Gentle says that he gives up. And to protect La Brava, Gentle says that he brainwashed her to help him. So shortly after, they were taken away to be investigated. And Izuku, remembering that his performance is in a couple of minutes, he uses full cowling, and he runs back to the store to grab his bag, and he was able to get to the performance on time. And the show went off without any more problems, and by the end of the show, Eri smiled. And from here on out, the anime will be the exact same, with Endeavor trying to become a new symbol. And I guess this is where I'm going to leave the what if. I hope you enjoyed this entire series, and I honestly hope to see you next time on Something Z.